Hi, my name is Heather Short, and this is the science experiment that I did. What I wanted to do with this experiment was to test different types of fertilizers to see which produced the best plants. Mostly I really wanted to test vegetable gardens because I really wanted to plant a vegetable garden. So I had to do a little bit of research first, and there's basically two types of fertilizers out there. The first one is known as synthetic, which is the inorganic, the chemical type of the fertilizer, and then there's organic. What I found out about the synthetic form was that it does have higher concentration of the nutrients that the plants do need, but at the same time it's very easy to over-fertilize the plants with the synthetic kind. And also it has been known to deplete the trace minerals in the soil that the plants need as well. So I looked into the organic types of fertilizers, and what I found was that usually they're typically pretty good and they release nutrients slowly, which is typically better for the soil and the plants. So from there I went and bought several types of fertilizers. First I have black cow manure, which is cow manure, and sphagnum peat moss. Now both of these are organic types of fertilizers. Now down here we have the pellets, which are synthetic pellets, and we have all-purpose plant food, which is spray. Now both of these down here are the synthetic kind, so you have organic and inorganic. I really wanted two of each one to make it as fair as possible. Now after I looked at the different fertilizers, I had to decide on plants, and what I decided on was beans and cucumbers. The reason why I decided on those two is because they were very similar. Both of them had the number of days, which is 55 days until they reached maturity, and they had the same amount of exposure to sunlight that was needed, which was full sunlight. So I really picked those two to test. I picked two seeds to make sure that it didn't have a bad batch of seeds in one, or maybe one plant wouldn't grow as well this time of the year. So I was trying to see which fertilizer was best, so I was trying to eliminate any other variables that were possible. So in my experiment, the independent variables of this experiment are the fertilizer, and they are independent because that is what I'm purposely changing in each one of these pots. Now the dependent is my plant growth, because that is the responding variable to the changes in the fertilizers. Now for the controlled variables, I had many controlled variables. I made sure that I used the same pots. I made sure that I used the same potting soil. And I even made sure that it was in the same location so that it got the same amount of sunlight, and I watered each one the same amount of water. I actually used a tablespoon measuring spoon each time it needed to be watered, so I knew that it was equal in water. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the experiment for you so that you can see exactly the steps that I took in preparation for it. Now I have already separated each one of these fertilizers into little bags here. The first one that I'm going to use is pellets, and what the instructions said, I had to do some calculations to find out how much of each fertilizer was needed for a small amount like this, and what I found out is that it needed 2.46 milliliters in each one of these pots. So I'm going to half it here, so it's 2.46. And I'm going to put it in this first one, just like this. And again, remember that I have two different kinds of seeds. So two of each one are going to have the same fertilizer to represent the different seeds. Okay, and for my next one I have peat moss. The pots down here are already full of this potting soil that's down here. So what I wanted to do was just fill the 1/4 remaining of the pots with peat moss so that they were full. Put that in there like that. Okay. For the next fertilizer was the spray, which was the liquid synthetic fertilizer. And what it called for something this small, was 1.23 milliliters, and it was mixed with 946.35 milliliters of water. So that has already been mixed in this bottle so that I knew that the ratios were correct. And since I used this, I didn't have a spout, so I just opened it just a little bit. And, well, and I just poured a few drops into each one to make sure that I did not over-fertilize them. Now, on the other one, this is the black cow manure. So I'm going to take this over here, and again, just like with the peat moss, I am going to fill the pots the remaining 1/4 of the way. Now, there's 2 other pots back here, and what those 2 pots are for is kind of like the controlled of the experiment. These 2 back here only have potting soil in them. There's no fertilizer in them, because I really wanted to hone in on what the fertilizers themselves were doing. So now that all that is set up, what I did was I mixed them all up. I actually used this little pin here to make sure it gets all in there. And make sure it gets into the soil. Alright, and again, this is just potting soil, so I'm not going to mix that up. Now, I am going to put a hole into the center of these, and the information on the seed packets said about 1 inch down, which works perfectly for these pots. So these are my bean seeds, and I'm going to plant them right there, cover them up, and I'm going to put bean seeds all across this front row. Alright, and I'm going to put 2 more bean seeds back here in potting soil. Now, these are my cucumber seeds. Those are going to go in the row that's in the back. Now again, I'm setting this up exactly the same way as I did down there. So put them in there, cover them up. Alright, and the seed packets also said to lightly pat the tops down. So I'm going to lightly do so right now. Not too much though, because we want to make sure that the plants will grow in time. So that is how the experiment was set up. When I first started this, what my hypothesis or my prediction was that the manure was actually going to make the biggest and the most productive plant. The reason why I thought that is because A, it is organic, and because of the fact that it releases nutrients slowly, and this experiment took a matter of 2 weeks, that extended time led me to believe that the slow release of the nutrients was best for these plants. Another reason why I chose manure was because I've heard much about it. I've heard so many people talk about it being the best fertilizer out there. So that was my hypothesis beforehand. Now, to make sure I've got everything, I've got a couple of charts here. And this is on day 7. After 7 days of being planted here, the same amount of water, the same amount of sunlight, these are the results that I found. And as you can see, the cucumbers grew much faster initially than the beans did. And these are in centimeters. So the tallest plant was almost 9 centimeters at the time. And we have potting soil down here, spray, manure, granules, peat moss. You can see down here that the granules had no growth at all. Nothing had happened in that first 7 days. The potting soil alone, no fertilizer, after day 7, had the most amount of growth for those seeds that I planted. Now, however, you'll notice that the potting soil, the cucumbers grew all the way to 9 centimeters. And they were the tallest out of the cucumber seeds. And that was the potting soil. But down here for the bean, you'll see that it grew the most in the spray, as opposed to the other fertilizers. So I'm already seeing a difference between the bean seeds and the cucumber seeds and how they change within each fertilizer. I took a couple of pictures after day 7, and you'll see how it's set up. The front row is the beans and the back is the cucumbers. So you can see each one. That was the peat moss, the granules, the manure, the spray, and just the potting soil. That is a front view. And there is my little plants from the top side. So after that, I let them grow for another 7 days. On day 14, I measured them again, and again, nothing has changed. It has had the same amount of water, the same sun, everything has kept constant. You can see a big difference now in these results. Now, the bean seeds are by far the tallest. And in the peat moss, the beans grew to 36 centimeters. So the beans did the best in the peat moss. Now, let's look at the cucumbers, which is the red columns. They grew the best in the manure. So my results were varied. So the conclusion that I came to is that there is no fertilizer that is best. It depends on what you're planting and what that plant needs. So I looked back at my results and I saw that the bean seed, this is a little bit of research that I had to do to find this out, but the bean seed grew the most in peat moss. So I really wanted to know why that happened. And the reason why is that bean seeds, when they're growing, they need a high concentration of nitrogen, and peat moss happens to be high in nitrogen. So now looking at the cucumber seeds, it did best in the manure. I looked, cucumbers need low amounts of nitrogen, very, very small amounts. And manure has the lowest amount of nitrogen out of all of these. But you will notice that out of these two, well, out of all the fertilizers that I tried, the organic kind produced the tallest plants. So again, there is no conclusion to reach for this. It really does depend on the seeds that you plant, and if you want to, you can make different rows and put different fertilizers on each one. But if anybody tells you that this fertilizer is the best, it just must have been the best on their plant. So I hope that this information helps you in your gardening just as it has in mine. Thank you.